what was your first experience, your first memory of this place? Like, when you were, even before you came to work here, when you were a teenager?
Well, it was a place where my dad brought me to show me where the family was, where the family business was. And that was in the early 40s. And so I enjoyed having a chance to see that. It was a very busy place because this was an important manufacturing plant for World War II support. And there were ships all over the place being loaded up with goods that are being taken to our troops overseas and so on. So that was my first memory of it.
You must have been 10 years old at the time?
Yes,
9 or 10?
9 or 10 years old, and then I started working here at age 12.
Wow. Now I guess if your family owns the place, they can't be accused of breaking child labor laws.
No, and having been a Depression baby, the work ethic was very strong.
Right.
It just didn't occur to anybody to not be productive as soon as you possibly could, and they had a need for a mill messenger, and so I got that as a job for my summer work at age 12.
And you called yourself a human pneumatic tube.
Yes, I replaced a pneumatic tube and took the orders from the order desk to the shipping department.
Now, did this start in the summer, or did you do it after school, or what were the hours?
The summer.
It was summertime.
It was the summertime, and there was some construction going on the other side of the office building here that took out the pneumatic tubes that delivered the paperwork from the order desk to the shipping department. And so for a period of about 3 months, they needed a person to deliver those messages, and I got that job.
What's your first memory of having a Fisher scone?
Well, my parents took me to the Puyallup Fair even before I'd had a visit to the mill.
Right.
And so the first thing that the family did immediately upon entering the Puyallup Fairgrounds was go to the scone booth and have a scone. So that was my first memory, and it would have been back in the early 40s.
And you must have been aware that Fisher was your name as well. You saw it on the scone booth. You were eating a scone
Right.
made with the flour from the factory.
That is correct. And my dad had worked here for many years, and I was familiar with the fact that I had multiple relatives that were all here, and that our name was on products all over the place,
Right.
and in the store, and in the supermarket, and in the feed store.
How big is your extended family? How many Fishers are there, or were there back in those days, and do they still live in the area?
Well, there are many members of the family that still live here. Once the business was sold, the tradition of an annual family picnic slowly died out, but in the days before the company was sold, there would be as many as 100 family members turn up for a picnic at somebody's home who was willing to host that. And
at what point, because I sort of know a rough outline of the history, and I know that the mills rather cleverly bought I think it was Como to begin with, Como Radio in the mid-20s, and as a publicity vehicle for, along with the scones, that was another outreach for Fisher flour. So do you slowly over the next decades, the Fisher family accumulated a small empire of broadcasting
yes.
facilities?
Well, my dad was an announcer on KOMO radio the day it went on the air. But I
Right.
know that he was an announcer on the radio
What was
that
your
day.
dad's name?
Ken Fisher.
Ken Fisher. Okay.
And he
Did he have a good voice? I mean, was
had
it
a good voice, and so he had that job. And but OD, the license for that station was available because the person who was operating on that frequency was using it to facilitate a running operation.
Right. Well,
And
we know
the
who that is.
Federal government took that away from them, and someone got a hold of that license and then came to my family to see if they would back him.
Right.
And O.D. Fisher, they said yes, they would, and they did, and eventually ended up buying that other person out.
Wow.
So that was the beginning of it. And
It's pretty fascinating that Prohibition also played a part in acquiring the. So it was almost a perfect storm of coincidences and.
yeah, and it wasn't. It was just somebody showing up with an offer to do something, and someone said, "Well, that sounds like a interesting idea." And then the first year they went on the air, they pre-sold the entire year to different advertisers.
So pre-sold all of the
advertising. So it was a very interesting and new way of doing the radio business, and to provide marketing for a number of the people who were friends of the Fisher family who signed on and did that. And
meanwhile, Roy Olmsted was in jail. I think he was headed off to McNeil Island for a while.
And then they acquired KJR, and so anyway, that was the beginning of the radio business. And of course they built a facility up at 4th and Denny,
Right.
as a radio station, with the hopes they were going to get a TV license at some point. And then
The TV license.
the TV license arrived, and that facility was added to the radio station building at 4th and Denny.
Was there a point at which Fisher Flower sort of became eclipsed a little bit by Fisher Broadcasting, so that or did they maintain sort of equal prominence?
Well,
in the
they had
family?
separate boards and were separate organizations, all owned by
Members
Fisher.
of the family, yeah.
But they maintained separation and operated as separate businesses, and then the broadcasting business started to grow,
Right.
and eventually the milling business. The milling business competed in the 12 western states
Yeah.
and did its advertising on regional radio, on NBC and CBS radio and so on. And but eventually it was going to be very difficult to compete with national organizations on an effective basis. And so that began the process of determining that the packaged products division would be sold off and to Krusty's, and
And that, in a sense, that was true of the broadcasting.
broadcasting became the primary business at that point, and it was renamed Fisher Communications
Right.
as the parent company, which was a public company. And the milling operation was sold, and then eventually the same thing came true for broadcasting, as we were up to, I think, 21 TV and 17 or 18 radio stations.
Most in the Northwest, or
Almost all in the Northwest, although at one point we had stations in Augusta, 2 stations in Georgia. But the again, that was pared down over a period of time, and it was West Coast and small market radio stations in eastern Washington and Montana and
Right.
places like that, which were wonderful places to do business and a lot of fun. And that's where I spent my career after age 17. I went into was into the broadcasting business, and so started out as the floor director and ended up as chairman of the board of the company over a 50-some year period of time. So
Right.
I had a chance to see it all. I was on the boards of Fisher Mills and of all of the various subsidiaries, Fisher Properties, and
Do you miss it?
well, I had a wonderful time. I enjoyed what I was doing. I had a chance to meet so many business people in the community who it was so important to help support their success,
Right.
which in the marketing side of things, which is what I loved, was helping someone else succeed was an exciting thing for me all of my life.
Right.
And the family ethic was to always do the right thing. I remember that being taught to me as a very young person, and definitely when I started here working at the mill, it was do the right thing. If you don't know what it is, do what you think it is, but no matter how it hurts, always do the right thing. And it's something that I believed in and operated on my entire life, and
Right.
It paid off. It just made it was fun. You can enjoy your work and some success and connection with it. It's a wonderful life, and that's how it's been for me. So, and now it's a great opportunity to think back to all of those wonderful times.
Yeah.
I look out here, and the government presented Fisher Mills with I think it was the E Award for excellence for service to the country. And there was a major ceremony where the presentation was made, and they built a platform out here and flew the E flag in the center of the parking lot.
What year was
here in
that?
front.
Post-war.
Post-war, but right toward the end.
Right.
Then when the days of Vietnam and so on, when they invented Allah here,
Right.
and which was a substitute for rice. And all of the people that were run over by the war in Vietnam in that area, in that era, they lost their rice fields and their primary food.
Right.
And Allah was something that allowed them to have a food, and it was shipped in. I mean, the shipload after shipload went off the docks, and that was invented right here. And then it was the research was funded by the government, and it became a universally licensed product that could be used to help save the world on food.
Right.
So that was another exciting thing that happened right here in the Fisher Mills area with
That's
people
amazing.
who took on that challenge, figured out how to do it, and the products, it may still be on the market, I'm not sure, but it's using wheat as a substitute for rice.
How does it make you feel to be back on this spot?
Well, it reminds me of the fact that almost all of the family lived in Montana in 1900, and they were in the milling business. And my grandfather was the one brother who was sent over to the Pacific Coast here to set up an operation to sell the products
Right.
to bakeries and so on here in this area, and then eventually led to the entire family moving from Montana to here and establishing
So you just
the mill.
lock, stock, and barrel moved from Montana to
They did,
Seattle.
yes. one at a time and so on, but they came over here. And so I just think back about my great uncles who did such a remarkable job of developing business and collaborating with each other, and each of them taking a role,
Right.
which then brought in some of the next generation as well, which included my father and his brother Peter Fisher and so on. So it was, I sit here and I think about what a wonderful family they were, who moved across the country from Missouri to
Right.
various places and ended up in Montana and then came over here and established this business, but they worked together.
So this is a legacy you're talking about.
I'm talking about the fact that a family stayed together, worked together, supported each other, and there were multiple branches, and they managed to get along and run a wonderful, honest, productive business.
Right. For the better part of the 20th century.
Right. And so I was invited back when to receive the 100-year award from the state of Washington from the Secretary of State, Sam Reed, I believe it was, who made that presentation at an event which I was invited to, and I was the one that was asked to come up and receive the 100-year certificate from the state of Washington and make a small, some comments and so
Right.
on. And so I had nothing to do with the beginnings. I just had valued what my relatives, all of the branches, did
And
that was
created.
so constructive and thoughtful, and
Right.
how they stayed together. I mean, many families don't,
That's true.
and this group did. They managed to find a way to collaborate and cooperate and support one another.